Hey everybody, welcome back to another Film of the Week. Hope you guys have been enjoying the content on the channel as of late, and we are back once again with another Film of the Week, and definitely not a light one to discuss, as I was trying to get to this film for quite some time, but now finally committed and sat down to watching it, that being a Tatarsky film, and just a film that I was actually really interested to see for quite a long time. Now I've seen it, and now we can discuss it together. That film being Stalker, which was directed by Andrei Tatarsky, who we've discussed before on this channel. I have no idea if I'm saying his name correctly, so apologies. Director who gave us Solaris, as well as Mirror, as well as a couple of other films, like The Sacrifice, which I have not seen. But namely, I have seen Solaris and Mirror, of which we discussed on this channel, released in 1979, and is following a group of three men, three of which have specific roles to them. The first of which is referred to as a stalker, which when you follow him throughout the film, you pretty much get the sense that he is that of a religious point of view, has basically the strongest of a religious sensibility. And then you have the person referred to as the professor, who is all due in science, more in the belief, so he is the polar opposite to that of the stalker, so his belief is due in science, so you have religion versus science. And then you have the writer, who is sort of the midpoint in between these two, where someone is viewing it purely from a factual point of view, where the other is viewing it more from a religious point of view. He is sort of viewing it more so from how he feels things, how he deciphers his overall feelings. These three together are embarking on a quest to search for the Zone, which is a mysterious site which supposedly has a room which gives a person their greatest desire. So when you come to this room, you are perhaps given something of which that you desire the most, and that is essentially what the narrative, just the through line, that is what is being told. But really, what the film ultimately is, quite blatantly, surprisingly, is about, of course, about the lack of purity, lack of honesty about humanity, and then really the natural medicine, and to some extent some of the limitations within environment, maybe perhaps the economic advantages, economic disadvantages, industrial landscapes, because there's this interesting tints that they play with throughout the film, this orange tints that they play a lot throughout the film, and then when we get closer to the Zone, the color taking shape, which can be presented as a form of pollution, that in the literal and the more emotional sense, and the color providing just quite literally just a form of clarity. And of course, when the color is present, it's a lot to do with, for a majority of the film, taking place in the natural environment. There's also these, within the packaging of these ideas about lacking in purity and lacking of honesty, and it's exhibiting that of a depressive idea. The sort of atmosphere that is built in this film is that of a depressive idea, because perhaps the sort of honesty is within that of a depressive idea, and not having this sort of ignorance being formed, which is again another portion of what the film is exploring, is that about ignorance, and a lot about how that sort of takes shape, and sort of demons that are formed within that. Sort of influences the sort of beliefs, the sort of roles that you have taken within these three perspectives that are formed: that of religion, that of science, that of the writer. They all exhibit a certain form of ignorance and a certain form of depression, and I mean, what you get here is proper Tatarsky, in that it is incredibly dense in how it is presented. in its overall perspective. I mean, it's obsessively detailed. I mean, just the peeling of the layers, just these overall just attention to detail. I mean, it is as densely spoken as it is framed. I mean, it is just a feast for the eyes. I mean, just gorgeous framing, and the camera work. The sort of tracking shots are just very, very seamless. Um, but um, but it is dense in the overall details. But it's not, I would say, dense in the overall variety and thematic quality, because one of the things that's interesting about Tatarsky is that when you watch his films, it can be a little bit hard to decipher what he is talking about, but it has a lot to do with just the overall density of his subject matter, and over the expansion of that subject matter. It's not where it's centralizing itself to one specific point and then kind of growing from that. It's sort of just kind of letting itself kind of really take shape, and you can kind of examine a multitude of ideas from it. Whereas this, it's pretty abundantly clear as to what it is about about ignorance, about a lack of purity, the sort of the like I said, the sort of ignorance that is formed, that of a lack of honesty in oneself. How one tries to break from their own sorrow and their own illusions through the reach and understanding of that person's truth, and taking the steps that they're afraid to take in seeing the reality of themselves. I mean, it all very much, boils back to the same idea about one's identity, one's pure form of themselves. And also this big sort of luring idea about depression. It's very, very abundantly clear when you watch it. And the film is very allegorical. The sort of the journey that we take with these characters is meant to be completely metaphorical and allegorical, in that all the characters are meant to represent a certain aspect to the idea, and not that they individually are just themselves certain characters, and developing their own identities. They all are tools in service to the themes, to the ideas at play, which also is very much Tatarsky, in that it is his concern is not with character. His concern is an examination of an idea, and just really just going to town on it. And Stalker is no exception to that. I mean, there's ways of viewing it from perhaps an economic point of view, like how the characters are quite literally running around like rats in a sewer, and the sort of limitations within that in achieving their dreams and achieving the things that they perhaps desire. And as I said, it's sort of the color tint, how it plays to the characters, their overall emotional sensibilities, and perhaps in just the literal look of things, the polluted frame in the orange tint, the clarity that comes with the color, the how it plays within a certain point of view when it comes to perhaps a child, and there's color when and other points it's polluted with the adults, and you see that the sort of the change, why it is we are viewing it from the color in the youth, in that perhaps it is believing that they can achieve anything. When you're young, you just have this idea that you can believe anything if you literally put your mind to it, which, if you know what I'm saying in the film, the very last shot of the film is of this little girl, mentally sort of moving things around the table without even touching it. And it's meant to illustrate that of purity and youth, and that if you put your mind to anything, you can do it. And it's quite literally a showing of that. So it's very, very apparent as to what it's about. And even though it is quite dense in the writing department and the overall exploration of the idea, I believe that the portrait and the variation, that feeling of variety and idea, is lacking when it comes to this. It is very apparent as to what it's about. And in that it can feel a bit long in length. It can feel a bit tedious, because I didn't feel that as much with Solaris. I would say Solaris still being my favorite of what Tatarsky has done. Mirror being fine for what it is, but again, still traditional in what Tatarsky does. This just feels more blatant. It still has a lot of what's working with Tatarsky. That's a density in the exploration, but that exploration is not as wide in the actual ideas. It is all just basically a tree. You have the seed, and it's just the roots. And you understand though what is planted. You understand what is growing, and it's not going to be anything more than just that. And even though the exploration is quite extraordinary, quite like amazing to see, and it's just dense in that sort of idea, that sort of playfield. I do wish though for more ideas outside of just this idea of honesty and purity and self, about ourselves, our relationship to ourselves. I wish that it was more than that, because I got that idea pretty much like an hour in, and this is about a 3-hour film, so that's my one quibble with it. But aesthetically, a thing of beauty. Thematically, just the exploration of that idea is extraordinary. And it's like it's a film that revels in just talking about the idea. Literally at one point the director at one point literally addresses the audience. In some ways, almost like breaks the fourth wall, just expressing his feelings, expressing these desires for acceptance and for self-worth, and and almost like the whole film is sort of like an allegory, perhaps, of like the human body. Sort of the just creeping to the surface. This is about getting to that truth, getting to that place. There are, as Tatarsky usually is, there is a multitude of ways to view the aesthetic, but the viewpoint is rather narrow in that it is only in surface to a specific point, and not to where usually with Tatarsky, where I can just look at things and I can just go, oh, well, that means this, and that means that, and then you're like, well, these pieces are not really connecting. With this, when I see something, it just confirms what I'm feeling, and that's not usually how it is with Tatarsky. And it does work against the film, because as I said, that runtime does sort of wane on you, and it does distance you in the commentary, in the sort of the dialogue that is playing. Even though it is excellent, there is a distance that is felt in the lacking of more variety and more just general ideas to play with. But it is still remarkable filmmaking, and the exploration itself is dense, obsessively detailed, and just really, really profound, but not super dimensional. I wish that there was more to the idea at play, and not just, like I said, a seed and then the roots just forming. I wish that there were more trees. Let's just put it that way. More trees, and us kind of playing in a forest of ideas, which usually feels like what Tatarsky is. So, or at least that's what I'm more or less connected to when it comes to Tatarsky, is more of a forest and not just one specific tree. So, but still, amazing, like really, really great stuff. If you have not checked out Stalker, please check it out. It is a really, really great piece. I just wish that it had more to say than what it's saying. So, but what it is saying though is really, really great and really powerful. So, and very, very insightful, as Tatarsky always is. So those are my thoughts on Stalker. I really enjoyed it. I just wish that it had more trees. That's sort of the way that I'll phrase it. I just wish there was more trees and not just the one tree. Again, really, really great. I love this combination of of philosophies, the clashing of those philosophies, the hypocrisies within those philosophies. It's a very, very dense studies in those philosophies and how it informs each of those specific characters. I really, really like that. But again, I just wish there was literally more at play. So, in a thematic sense. But you guys know your thoughts on Stalker if you guys have seen it. Sorry, I don't know. Sorry, I just had a brain fart. This is pretty dense. This is some dense material to just take in. Like it's like someone just spilling a bunch of stuff on you. But my general feeling of the whole wave is that, well, okay, I can get rudimentary what you're saying, but it's not as what's what I'm looking for. It's not as interpretive as I would have wanted it to be. So, but you guys know your thoughts on Stalker if you guys have seen it, and of course your thoughts on Tatarsky, any other films of his that I should see. Curious about Ivan's Childhood. That's another one of his films that I'm curious to see. But you guys know your thoughts on Tatarsky and of course this film in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in, and until then, I will catch you guys in the next video.